The music had only just begun when something in the room changed. Not the tempo, not the tune. It shifted like the first whisper of a summer storm, quiet but certain. A movement unnoticed by most. All heads were turned toward the back of the chapel. Toward her, toward the bride. No one noticed him at first. Not until he took a step forward. Not until he walked out from the quiet space between the pews and into the light. No one expected it. No one planned it. But when he moved, something deeper than silence fell across the crowd. He wasn't the man written on the little white card at table 7. He wasn't the one who was supposed to be there. And yet, when he walked forward, it felt like the whole ceremony had finally started. To understand the weight of that moment, you have to go back to the night before the wedding. Back to the celebration that should have been filled with ease, but wasn't. Not completely. Claire's rehearsal dinner was held at Oak Ridge Farm, a countryside venue tucked on the edge of Hollow Creek, once a weathered old barn with creaking beams and dust-covered stalls. It had been lovingly restored into a rustic dream-polished wood floors, chandeliers made from wrought iron and wine bottles, and string lights looping between towering oak trees like suspended stars. Golden lanterns flickered along the gravel path. Soft guitar music drifted from the porch. Roasted rosemary chicken perfumed the air, and the laughter of guests danced beneath the canopy of branches. Claire sat at the head table, her ivory rehearsal dress catching the warm glow of candlelight. Her blonde curls were gathered behind her ears, and the shimmer in her eyes looked like it might be from joy if you didn't look too closely. Because beside her, a chair sat empty. Its napkin lay folded with quiet precision, its plate untouched. A delicate name card rested on the table in front of it, handwritten, a single name, Richard, her father, the man who wasn't coming. He had declined 2 days before in a brief, impersonal email. Won't be able to make it. Hope it all goes well. Nothing else. No apology, no warmth. Just the same hollow distance she'd known since childhood. And yet, she'd left the seat for him anyway. Hope can be foolish like that. Across the table, Jack, her fiancé, watched her eyes drift toward the chair again. He didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just reached across the white linen and gently found her hand. His touch was soft and steady, reassuring. She held on, loosely, just enough to say, "I know you're here." They had met 4 years ago in Brighton, outside a little bookshop she worked at during her graduate studies in urban design. Jack had wandered in looking for a photography collection and left somehow with her phone number. Their connection was instant, effortless. She adored the way he saw buildings. He loved the way she imagined streets. Their shared obsession with spaces made even Sunday afternoons feel like planning sessions for a life still under construction. He proposed in York on a foggy morning by the old city wall. Hands shaking, smile crooked. And she had said yes before he even finished the question. But in the days leading up to the wedding, something inside Claire had started to ache. Not because of Jack, because of Richard. Because every milestone makes the missing pieces feel sharper. At table 7, people avoided talking about the chair, but they noticed it. The way you notice a crack in the glass you pretend isn't there. During dessert, Jack's mother leaned toward Claire, trying to be friendly, kind even. "So, sweetheart," she said with an encouraging smile, "who's walking you down the aisle tomorrow?" Claire paused. The fork in her hand hovered over a chocolate tart. She blinked once, then answered with a practiced softness. "We haven't decided yet." It wasn't the truth, but it was easier than the story behind it. Thomas sat quietly nearby. Third chair down. Not close enough to be center, but close. Enough to hear. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 60s, with warm brown skin and salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp. His face carried the kind of lines that came from sun, work, and years of patience. He wore a gray suit that hung just a little too loose at the shoulders, and a blue tie that didn't quite reach his belt. There was a quiet dignity about him. The kind of man people didn't always notice, but when they did, they remembered him. His hands, strong and steady, rested calmly in his lap. He didn't shift when Claire answered. He didn't correct anyone. He never had. Because Thomas never lived in titles or attention. He lived in action, in the everyday, in the background where love doesn't need to be loud to be real. He simply reached for his water, sipped slowly, and kept his eyes on the flickering candle in front of him. Thomas had entered Claire's life when she was 7. He was the man her mother married after Richard left. A quiet, steady man who worked in air conditioning repair coming home, with dust on his sleeves and tools in the back of his truck. A man who knew how to make pancakes without a recipe and taught her how to change a flat tire before she turned 16. He had never asked for anything from her, never pushed, never pried. He just stayed. Stayed when nightmares woke her up. Stayed through every scraped knee and missed birthday party. Stayed through science fairs, awkward school dances, and graduation speeches. And yet, no one at that table raised a glass in his name. No one asked if he'd be giving her away. No one called him Dad. Because Thomas never asked for the spotlight, and no one ever offered it. He lived in the quiet corners of her life, the background, the foundation. But Claire had always seen him, even when she wasn't ready to say it out loud. When the toasts began, Claire and Jack stood together, smiling, grateful. She raised her glass and thanked everyone for being there. The applause was warm and sincere. And yet after the final toast faded into laughter, her eyes found that empty chair again, still untouched, still waiting for a man who hadn't really been there in years. Thomas shifted just enough in his seat to glance her way. He saw it, the shine in her eyes. Not from the wine, not from joy. From the ache of something unfinished. He didn't say a word. Didn't offer comfort. Just let the moment breathe, the way he always did. That night, long after most of the guests had gone inside and the lanterns flickered low, Claire sat alone near the edge of the venue. The barn behind her glowed with soft amber light. The scent of cedar and cut grass hung in the air. In her hands, she twisted a ribbon from her bouquet. Again and again, until the tension in her fingers matched the knots in her chest. The door creaked, footsteps, a gentle voice. "Claire?" It was the officiant, a woman named Margaret. Soft voice, silver bun, glasses resting halfway down her nose. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, holding a folder to her chest. "I just need to confirm one small detail for the ceremony tomorrow. Shall I say that your father will be walking you down the aisle?" Claire's heart thudded once. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away. After a long breath, she whispered, "Please, don't mention my father at all." Margaret paused for just a moment. She nodded without asking for explanation. "Of course," she said gently. "It's your day." She turned and walked back toward the barn. But in that moment something cracked inside Claire. Just a hairline fracture. But enough. Enough to let the memories pour in. She used to wait for him. Every weekend, like clockwork. Claire was just 5 when her father left. A tiny girl in mismatched socks, always holding her favorite stuffed rabbit too tightly. Her world had been soft and simple until that day. The day Richard stood in the doorway, duffel bag over one shoulder, and told her he'd be back real soon. She had believed him. Children always do. She remembered standing at the window every Saturday, her breath fogging up the glass as she watched for headlights that never appeared. Hours would pass, sometimes days. And still, she'd wait thinking maybe he got lost. Maybe he forgot which apartment was theirs. Maybe next week. But one day, without realizing it, she stopped going to the window. Just stopped. The ache didn't go away. It just sank deeper. Years passed. Life moved forward. Her mother eventually met someone new. He came quietly into their lives. His name was Thomas. A quiet, broad-shouldered man with kind brown eyes and deep chestnut skin. He wore heavy work boots that left dust on the welcome mat and smelled faintly of sawdust and aftershave. Not flashy. Not loud. Just ... there. The first time he came over, Claire had sat at the kitchen table coloring with her markers. She didn't look up. She didn't want to. Thomas didn't force a smile. Didn't lean in with a fake cheer. He simply bent down to her level, held out his rough hand, not to shake, but to hold, and said, "I heard you're the best artist in this house. That true?" She didn't answer. Just blinked at him. So he sat beside her without waiting. For permission, picked up a green marker and began coloring the sky. Not blue-green. She looked over, confused. "Sky's supposed to be blue," she mumbled. He grinned, kept coloring. "Maybe in the real world, but in this one. You're the boss." She giggled, just a little, and that was the beginning. Thomas never tried to be her father. He didn't push for hugs. He didn't correct her when she called him by his first name. He never asked to be loved. He simply stayed. When she scraped her knee on the sidewalk, he knelt on the ground, hands trembling as he cleaned the cut with antiseptic, and whispered, "You're okay, kiddo. I've got you." When she bombed a spelling test and burst into tears, he baked her favorite cinnamon cookies and slid her a note under her door. "C is still passing. Cookies are a plus." He was there for every parent-teacher conference, sitting, proud as her teachers called her curious and determined. He cheered at every dance recital, even the ones where she missed every step. He built her science fair volcano when she ran out of time, letting her take all the credit. He stayed up during thunderstorms, sitting outside her bedroom with a flashlight and a book, just in case you need backup. And when she was 8, lying in bed with a million questions tumbling through her head, she finally whispered, "Why don't I call you Dad like the other kids do?" He smiled, quiet and patient. "You don't have to call me anything you're not ready for," he said, brushing her hair back with a hand that had seen years of work. "I'm just here. And I'm not going anywhere." And he wasn't. Now in the present, Claire stood in her bridal suite, staring into the mirror like she was trying to find a version of herself she recognized. Her gown shimmered like moonlight poured into silk. The pin in her hair glinted as it caught the soft amber of the overhead chandelier. Everything was in place. But something inside her wasn't. Her reflection looked beautiful, perfect, even. But hollow. She thought of Thomas. Of how his suit always sat just a little too big in the shoulders. How he adjusted his tie 5 times before any formal event, then usually gave up and left it slightly crooked. How he always stood slightly behind her, just outside the photo, just outside the frame. But today wasn't a day for shadows. Today, she didn't want him in the background. She didn't want him sitting quietly off to the side. Today, she wanted the world to see him, because he was the one who had shown up every day, every year. She took a shaky breath, stared into the glass, and whispered under her breath, "He's always been my father. He just never asked me to say it." Later that morning, the boutique was glowing with golden light. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting. Claire in 100 delicate angles, lace, tulle, silk swirling around her as she stepped onto the pedestal. Her veil floated down her back like a waterfall of snow. The air smelled of lavender sachets and warm fabric. The bridal consultant crouched near the hem of her gown, making tiny adjustments with pins between her teeth. Claire's mother sat on the small couch nearby, dabbing her eyes with the tissue. "Oh, honey," her mother whispered, voice catching in her throat, "you look like a dream." Claire gave her a small smile. The kind you practice for photographs, the kind that doesn't quite reach your eyes. She looked at herself again. At this poised woman in white, who barely resembled the girl who used to build pillow forts and dream of magic forests. She felt detached, like she was watching someone else's wedding unfold. The consultant's phone buzzed from the counter. "Excuse me," she said, checking the screen. "It's for you. He asked for you by name." Claire's heart thudded once. Hard. She stepped off the pedestal and took the phone with hesitant fingers. "Hello," she said. There was a pause. Then a voice. Familiar in a cold, deep, faraway way. A voice buried in memory. "Claire, I'm not going to make it. Something's come up." That was it. "No, I'm sorry. No, I wish I could be there." No explanation. Just another absence. Just another disappointment dropped into her lap like a stone. "Oh," she said, voice flat. She held the phone for a moment longer than necessary, then handed it back and asked the consultant to finish the fitting quickly. Her voice didn't shake, but her spine felt brittle. Claire stood still in the bridal suite, wrapped in a soft cotton robe. The world outside the window was stirring, florists arranging blooms, photographers checking their light, distant music floating in on the breeze. The light filtering through. The gauzy curtains bathed everything in gold. But inside, she didn't move. Her eyes were on the vanity, on her purse. She wasn't ready for her makeup yet. Not the powder, not the blush, not the ceremony smile. She just needed something familiar. Something real, lip balm maybe. She crossed the room in bare feet, the wood floor cool against her solace. She unzipped the side pocket of her purse, but instead of her balm, her fingers brushed something unexpected: folded paper. She pulled it out slowly. Her breath caught. It was Thomas's handwriting. Neat, steady, a little slanted to the right, the same script she'd seen for years, on lunchbox notes. Reminders stuck to the fridge. Birthday cards signed "From Mum and T." That unmistakable hand that always seemed to say just what she needed, even when he didn't speak. She unfolded the paper. Just one short sentence. "You never needed him to be enough. You've always been more than enough. T." Claire stared at the note for a long time. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't cry. Instead, she pressed a hand to her chest, holding the note in her other hand like it was a lifeline. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just ... him, true. Steady, quiet in all the places that mattered loudest. She sank into the vanity stool, the weight of the note still in her lap. And then, in the kind of whisper meant only for yourself, she said, "Maybe I wasn't missing a father. Maybe I just didn't recognize the one I had." A soft knock at the door broke the stillness. A voice called gently, "Time to start hair and makeup." Claire didn't respond at first. She let the moment sit. Let the truth of that note settle into her like sun-warmed cotton sheets, familiar, safe, and finally enough. Outside, the chapel was nestled in a grove of white-blossomed trees, the scent of spring thick in the air. The aisle was lined with petals, sunlight dappling the path through open windows. Rows of guests dressed in pastels and pressed suits turned toward the doors in collective silence. The string quartet began to play canon in D soft, reverent, rising gently like a prayer. Every head turned. There she was. Claire stood framed in the tall oak doors, her gown glowing in the morning light like it had been stitched from pearls and morning clouds. Her veil floated behind her, fingers holding the bouquet that trembled just slightly, as if unsure whether it was ready to let go of the past or step into the future. But she stood alone. No one was beside her. A stir moved through the pews. Gentle murmurs. "Where's her father? Isn't someone walking her down? I thought it was supposed to be ... Some guests fidgeted in confusion. Others exchanged polite glances, unsure whether to speak aloud the question floating in the air. And then quiet movement. Not from the back, not down the aisle, but from the front corner of the chapel, the side where shadows met sunlight. A man stepped out. He didn't hurry, didn't smile, didn't offer his arm immediately. It was Thomas. His brown skin contrasted with his crisp charcoal suit. The jacket fit better today, tailored just enough, though the tie still sat slightly askew, just as it always had. His face held composure, but his eyes shimmered with something unspoken, not nerves, not pride, something deeper, something rooted in years of quiet love. He paused halfway down the side aisle, near the front row. He didn't call to her, didn't reach out. He just stood there, waiting to see if she would come. Claire's eyes found his, and she exhaled not a breath of anxiety or fear, but one of peace. The kind of breath you take after surfacing from water you didn't realize was over your head. She walked, one slow step at a time. Her veil drifted behind her. The music swelled. The whispers faded. When she reached him, she didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She simply slid her arm through his. The fit was effortless, natural, like it had always belonged there. Somewhere in the back, a woman leaned over and whispered, "But that's not her real dad." And the man beside her replied softly, "Are you sure?" Because Thomas didn't walk beside Claire like someone filling in. He walked like someone who had been walking beside her all her life, just quietly, just patiently, just in the background where love does its best work. Claire's chin lifted as they moved toward the altar. Her eyes didn't waver. But just before the steps, her grip on his arm tightened. For only a second, just enough to say, "Thank you." Just enough to say, "I see you now." At the front of the chapel, under an arch of white roses and soft ivy, Claire and Jack stood side by side. The officiant's voice filled the warm spring air, solemn and sure. Jack had just finished his vows, tender, honest words that left Claire blinking away tears. It was her turn. She held a small card in her hands, the vows she'd rewritten half a dozen times. Nights spent at her desk, scratching out lines, trying to get them just right. But she didn't read them, not yet. Instead, she turned to the left, toward the man who sat quietly, hands folded in his lap, doing his best to remain invisible among the splendor. Her voice trembled, but it didn't waver. "Before I speak to the man I'm marrying," she said, turning to face Thomas, "I need to say something to the man who got me here." A soft gasp rose from the guests. Thomas looked up, startled. His lips parted, but no words came. Claire stepped forward. Just one step, close enough for him to see the shimmer in her eyes. "You never asked to be in the spotlight," she said. Gently. "You never asked for recognition. You never asked to be called Dad." The room held its breath. Even the birds outside seemed to go quiet. "But you were there," she continued, her voice thick with feeling. "You were there for every scraped knee, every birthday, every school play, every hard night." Thomas blinked hard. The tears came slowly, quietly, unstoppable. "You may not have given me your name," Claire said, voice cracking just enough to be real, "but you gave me everything else." She looked around the room, her voice gaining strength with each word. "And I want everyone here to know I was never fatherless. Not for a single day." Thomas's hand rose to his face, shielding the flood of emotion. His shoulders shook. Slightly, the kind of tremble that comes when years of silence are finally broken by truth. He tried to speak, to say something, anything. But all that came out was a shaky breath and a whispered, "Claire." At first, there was silence, the kind that stretches across a room and holds its breath. A sacred hush, then clapping. Soft at first. A few hands coming together gently, respectfully, then louder. Stronger. Applause surged through the chapel, not polite, not for show, not for tradition, for truth. Even the officiant stood straighter, a shimmer in his eyes as he looked between Claire and Thomas. Something in the air shifted. Something unspoken, but deeply felt. Claire smiled toward Thomas one more time, not a smile of performance. A real one, steady, grateful, freeing. Then she turned back to the altar, her vow card still in hand, but her heart 1,000 pounds lighter, because she had already said the only vow that had ever needed to be spoken, the one she'd carried her whole life in silence, the one no wedding program had ever printed, the one she never thought she'd have the courage to say aloud. By evening, the sun dipped behind the soft hills beyond the reception hall, casting everything in a golden hue that made the air itself look like it glowed. Inside, fairy lights twinkled like fireflies. Ivy-wrapped garlands hung between ceiling beams. Music floated through the space, gentle, soulful, like the rhythm of a calm tide. Laughter echoed between clinking glasses. Couples swayed on the dance floor. Children darted between tables, chasing each other with bursts of squeals and joy. It was a celebration of love, of a new beginning between two people at the start of forever. But quietly, in between the spotlight moments, something else was being honored. Another kind of love, one that had started long ago, one that had endured. Claire sat alone for a moment, just off to the side. Her wedding gown pooled around her like a lake of satin. Her bouquet rested on the seat beside her, petals still fresh, dewy with the evening air. Her makeup remained flawless, but her eyes told a different story, softened by the weight of all she'd carried, and all she'd finally let go of. She reached for her clutch to check the time, or maybe just to have something to do with her hands. That's when she noticed it. Tucked beneath her place card was an envelope, plain, unmarked. Her name was scrawled across the front in sharp, straight letters, familiar in the way a memory might be. Unwelcome, but undeniable. She opened it slowly. Inside, a single sheet of paper. A message, sparse, cold. Sorry I couldn't be there. I'm not good with weddings. Hope it was nice. No signature, no warmth, not even a closing. Just distance. Like always, she read it once, then again. It didn't sting the way it might have once. There were no tears, no sharp gasp. Just a familiar weight, a tired ache that had been there so long. It had become part of her bones. She folded the letter carefully, stood, and walked across the room. At the far corner, near a quiet service door, was a small trash bin. Just big enough for paper napkins and used tissues. She slipped the note inside. No ceremony, no hesitation. It landed softly among scraps of a celebration he hadn't come for. She turned, and there he was, Thomas, not watching, not waiting, just there. He stood near the edge of the room, hands in his pockets, smiling faintly as he watched someone else's toddler attempt a very serious version of the chicken dance. He looked peaceful, content, unaware of the storm that had just passed through her. Claire walked toward him. He noticed her just before she reached him. She held out her hand, open, certain. "May I have this dance?" she asked. His smile widened, not of pride, not of ownership, but of quiet awe. "You sure?" he said, almost a whisper. "Always." They didn't head for the center of the floor, not where the spotlight hit, not where guests clapped for performances or waited with cameras ready. They moved to the edge, where the light was soft, where the shadows were gentle, where no one chased them with questions or stares. Thomas placed one hand carefully on her back. She rested hers against his shoulder, and they began to sway. No grand choreography, no announcements, no speeches. Just motion, just music. He held her the same way he had steadied her bicycle seat when she was 9 and convinced she'd never learn. The same way he had sat beside her at 17 when her heart broke for the first time. The same way he had waited in his truck, engine idling, after every high school recital, never complaining, always present. He had always been there, through every season, every failure, every celebration she didn't think he noticed, but he did. And now finally she saw him too, fully. They didn't speak as they danced. They didn't need to. The moment said everything, that she was never abandoned, not really. That she had never been without love, not ever. That sometimes fathers are not the ones who make you. They are the ones who choose you, the ones who stay. The music continued. And for the first time that entire day, Claire didn't think about the man who wasn't there. She didn't wonder what might have been. Didn't ache for closure. Didn't mourn the letter in the bin. She thought only of the man who held her now. The one who had held her through everything. The one who had been a father, not because of blood, but because of everything else. As the final notes faded, Thomas leaned down slightly, forehead nearly touching hers. "You did good, kiddo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Really good." Claire smiled against his shoulder, closed her eyes. "Couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "You did all of it. I just stuck around. That's all I ever needed," she whispered. They stepped back, and the space between them was soft, grateful. She reached for his hand again, not to pull him forward, not to make a scene. Just to let him know she saw him now, all of him. And that was enough, more than enough. Sometimes the people who shape us the most are not the ones who gave us life, but the ones who gave us their time, their patience, and their love. A true parent is not defined by blood, but by presence, by consistency, by the quiet courage to stay. And in the end, it's not about who should have been there. It's about who chose to be. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to breathe, to remember the ones who stayed. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories that speak softly but stay with you, you know where to find us. Until next time, keep listening and keep feeling.